Because Tom Parker Bowles did not insult Catherine by attacking her clothes. He didn't question her title. He went somewhere far more personal. He suggested, in front of William, in front of Catherine, and in front of his own mother, Queen Camilla, that the woman Britain has come to trust, has spent years learning how to perform Diana. William heard it, Catherine heard it, Camilla heard her son say it, and within seconds William's chair was moving backwards. But that line was not the only thing that changed the room. The real damage happened afterwards, when William asked Tom a question he couldn't answer cleanly. A question that suddenly made one cruel remark feel much bigger than just one man's opinion. Because if Tom felt comfortable enough saying it with William and Catherine sitting directly across from him, where had that idea really come from? Earlier that evening, nothing suggested anyone was about to cross a line. The dinner had been calm. Conversation moved through upcoming engagements, public confidence, the future of the monarchy, and the growing responsibility William and Catherine were expected to carry. Charles had spoken warmly about Catherine's discipline under pressure. Others at the table agreed. It was, on the surface, one of those reassuring family evenings that make it into documentaries as proof that everything is steady. Then somebody used one word that shifted the focus. Trust. Not admiration. Not she's popular. Not people like her clothes. Trust. The comment was simple. The public trusts Catherine. That word settled differently. It wasn't about style or headlines. It was about the fact that millions of people have begun to see Catherine as more than just William's wife. She represents steadiness, family, restraint, and a quiet reliability that can't easily be manufactured. For years now, Catherine has been the person people look to when they want proof there is still something sane at the center of the institution. That's not a small thing to say out loud at a table filled with people who carry titles of their own. Tom Parker Bowles listened as the praise went on. Camilla's son, food writer, critic, occasionally commentator, had barely interrupted, but as the conversation kept circling back to Catherine, his silence began to feel less like politeness and more like tension. Then he finally joined in. At first, it sounded almost complimentary. He said Catherine understood the role exceptionally well. She knew what people wanted from a Princess of Wales. She understood how to connect. She knew when to speak, when to remain quiet, how to dress without overwhelming the occasion, how to show emotion without letting it explode all over the front pages. It was the kind of list that, taken alone, could have been read as praise for her professionalism. Then the list sharpened. The soft expressions, the understated clothes, the careful gestures around children, the controlled vulnerability during difficult moments. One detail, then another, then another. Each observation on its own still sounded harmless. Then Tom brought up Diana. That was when the air changed. He suggested Catherine's enormous popularity existed partly because she had become very good at presenting the kind of princess Britain already knew how to love. And then he said the line that froze the table. She's been very successful at becoming the kind of princess people wanted to remember. Let's stop there for a second. Because if you're watching this and that sentence makes your jaw clench, you're not alone. The idea that Catherine is becoming the kind of princess people wanted to remember is not just commentary on image. It's a suggestion that she has looked at what Diana meant to Britain and deliberately shaped herself into that memory. Royal Watchers, I want you to answer one simple question in the comments. What on earth gave Queen Camilla's own son the confidence to sit at that table and say that? Don't just sit there angry and watch in silence. Put your thoughts below, and before you scroll away, let the entire comment section say it together. We love you, Catherine. If you believe she has carried enough pressure and deserves to be defended when somebody crosses the line, hit like, share this with another Royal Watcher, and subscribe to Palace Beacon. Because when thousands of people speak with one voice, nobody inside the palace can pretend the public didn't notice how far that remark went. Back at the table, Catherine did not answer Tom. That silence made everything worse. She didn't challenge him, didn't roll her eyes, didn't demand an apology, didn't try to embarrass him. Her eyes dropped for a moment, her hand paused beside her glass. Her expression stayed controlled, but William knows her too well to confuse composure with indifference. Tom kept talking. He suggested some women were loved purely for who they are. Others, he implied, are loved because they understand exactly what image people want to see. That's not a neutral observation anymore. That's a judgment. Her warmth becomes strategy. Her restraint becomes rehearsal. Her connection with people becomes performance. And because the words are coming from Camilla's son, another question enters the room without anyone needing to say it aloud. Is this only Tom's view? Or has Catherine been spoken about this way before? Somewhere William wasn't present to hear it. William looked at Catherine again. Then he looked back at Tom. The man across from him had not simply insulted his wife. He had taken the memory of William's mother and used it to question whether Catherine was genuine at all. The scrape of William's chair across the floor cut through the room. He stood slowly, deliberately, furious, but not out of control. For Catherine, the sting behind Tom's remark didn't start at that dinner table. It started years earlier, with a comparison she never asked for and could never completely escape. She didn't just marry Prince William, she married Diana's eldest son. From the moment Catherine stepped into royal life, every photograph seemed to invite a question. Is there something of Diana in this? In the clothes, in the smile, in the way she bends down to talk to a child? In the way crowds react when she enters a room, comparisons followed her everywhere. A coat could become a headline. A gesture could become a side-by-side image. Catherine today, Diana 20 years ago. A hospital visit. A hand on someone's shoulder. A quiet moment with a child. All could be reinterpreted as echoes. If Catherine dressed very differently, people noticed. If she wore something that reminded people of Diana, they noticed that too. If she showed emotion, there were comparisons. If she held herself together, there were comparisons. There was no clean way out. William watched all of it. He watched Catherine enter a family where his mother's memory wasn't history. It was the room. It was the way people breathed around certain topics. Diana was the woman whose face William knew before the world turned her into an icon, and the woman whose absence shaped almost everything that came after. That made one thing especially important. Catherine never tried to replace her. She never needed to. William said it himself years ago. No one's trying to fill my mother's shoes. What she did was fantastic. This is about making your own future and your own destiny, and Kate will do a very good job of that. The pressure was already enormous. Without turning Diana into a contest, Catherine could never win. If she did nothing that looked like Diana, it was a problem. If she did something that reminded people of Diana, it was a problem. She carried that quietly. That's why Tom's words cut so deeply. He wasn't accusing Catherine of failing to escape Diana's shadow. He was accusing her of using it. And that is a completely different level of accusation. There was another reason his remark hurt so much. Diana is not a neutral predecessor whose style you can copy and discuss like an old photograph. She is William's mother. When Tom suggested Catherine's success comes partly from deliberately presenting the kind of princess Britain already wanted to remember, he wasn't just talking about a media strategy. He was implying that Catherine had taken part of William's grief and turned it into a tool. And Tom wasn't some distant analyst saying that from a studio in London. He was Queen Camilla's son, sitting at the same table, inside the same family circle, talking about Catherine like this, in front of the man who has spent years defending both Diana's memory and Catherine's place beside him. That gave his words another edge. They weren't external commentary. They were coming from within the extended family. Across the table, Tom slowly turned his glass between his fingers while Charles spoke. Catherine listened. William's eyes shifted back and forth, reading the room. Nothing explosive happened yet. No one raised a voice, but the conversation had reached the exact subject Tom seemed determined not to leave alone. Catherine's public standing. For years, the qualities people admired in Catherine have been almost painfully simple. She shows up. She stays calm. She speaks carefully. She gives her attention to the person in front of her. She handles scrutiny without turning every difficulty into a performance about herself. To William, none of that is an act. Those are the private habits he sees when cameras disappear. That's the part Tom cannot see. He doesn't see the quiet conversations before engagements. He doesn't see the way Catherine worries about getting something wrong, then goes out and does the work anyway. He doesn't see the weight of stepping into a title permanently tied to a woman Britain still mourns. William does. So when Tom turned all of that into, she knows exactly what image people want, it wasn't just rude. It rewrote years of William's own life with Catherine. It suggested his wife earned trust not through consistency, but through calculation, that she had engineered her goodness. That's why Catherine's silence matters so much in this story. She has spent years refusing to turn Diana into a rivalry. She never needed to diminish William's mother to establish herself. She let the comparisons come and go without fighting every headline. Now Tom was trying to turn all of that quiet grace into evidence that she'd learned how to play the icon. Then William's chair moved. He didn't slam his fist or shout. He stood, looked directly at Tom, and said one line quietly. "You do not speak about my wife like that." It was calm. It was sharp. It was final. Tom tried immediately to retreat. He said he'd been talking about image, presentation, how the media make comparisons between Diana and Catherine, how those expectations shape any Princess of Wales. He tried to turn his sentence into an abstract analysis about branding. William refused to let him hide. If Tom wanted to talk about the media, he could have done that without suggesting that Catherine has become the princess people wanted to remember. If he wanted to talk about history, he could have left the accusation out. But he hadn't left it out, and William had heard exactly what he meant. His mother is not a costume. Catherine is not a copy. Camilla tried to soften things. She suggested Tom's meaning had been misunderstood, that he was talking generally about public expectations, not attacking Catherine. It was the kind of half-intervention that tries to lower the temperature without taking a side. William didn't accept it. Catherine stayed seated. She didn't join in. She didn't add to his anger. She didn't demand anything. She let William draw the line and kept her own composure as proof that grace doesn't need an audience. The irony was brutal. Tom had just implied Catherine had learned how to perform dignity. And there she was, in a private room, refusing to humiliate him, behaving exactly as she does in public, not because cameras were watching, but because that's who she is. And then William asked the question that broke the illusion of just an opinion. Had Tom really only thought of this tonight? Tom hesitated. Everyone saw it. William saw it. He asked again, quieter. Was this really the first time Tom had spoken about Catherine like this? Suddenly, the issue wasn't just one remark. It was the source. Was this just Tom's own resentment? Was it something he'd formed after reading years of headlines? Or had this way of talking about Catherine, as if she were performing Diana, already appeared in private conversations William wasn't part of? Nobody answered that clearly. Charles finally stepped in and said Tom owed Catherine an apology. No speech, no big lecture. Just a simple rebuke, apologize. That alone told you where the king stood on the remark itself. Tom apologized. He said he hadn't meant to insult her. He said his words had been poorly expressed. He claimed he'd been talking about public expectations, not Catherine's character. Catherine accepted the apology enough to let the evening end. She didn't punish him. She didn't press. She did what she has always done, carried herself with dignity, and left the room intact. But an apology only covers the insult. It doesn't answer the question William asked. Where did the thought come from? If Tom Parker Bowles felt comfortable enough to say openly that Catherine has built her image by becoming the kind of princess people wanted to remember, what was being said when William wasn't in the room? Who had been talking about Catherine when she wasn't there? That's the question that followed William out of the dinner, and it's the one this story really leaves hanging. If you believe Catherine deserves to be judged for the woman she actually is, not endlessly measured against Diana or accused of performing her, make your position unmistakable. Like this video. Subscribe to Palace Beacon. Share it with someone who still remembers what Diana meant to Britain. And write "Respect Catherine" in the comments. Because the next chapter in this story, the one that starts after that door closes and the dinner breaks apart, is about who tries to explain what Tom really meant, and the one name William hears that makes him stop walking. And that name changes everything about where the remark may have started.